Okay, we're going to show you how to install one of these metal decals onto the side of the mask. We're going to use these aluminum rivets. They're 16th inch aluminum rivets, and we chose them because they're very small, and so they will fit through one of the holes in this mask very easily without deforming the hole at all. You can see it sticking out there. And we'll show you how to attach these a little later on. So the first thing we have to do, you'll notice that there are no holes in the decal for the rivet. That's because the mesh of different manufacturers, and sometimes even from one mask to another with the same manufacturer, isn't uniform enough for pre-drilled holes to line up very well with the holes in the mask. So in order to fix that, we're going to have to mark the decal through the holes on the inside so that I know where to drill the hole. Okay? But this type of mask here adds a small complication because I want to mount this decal a little bit low, right? I don't want to mount it way up here because it doesn't look as good. But there is, if I mount the decal here, right, at the bottom where I want the holes to be drilled, there's padding that's not removable. So I can't right away mark the backside of the decal where I want this hole to be because the padding is in the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a caliper and I'm going to measure on the mask in the approximate location of where I want the decal to go, the distance between two of these holes. Okay? Now, it doesn't really matter which two I measure, all right? What matters is that the distance I've chosen here between any two holes, first of all, that it's the same row of holes so that the mask isn't going to, or the decal isn't going to end up crooked. And second of all, that the distance is basically end to end on the decal, right? So whichever two holes in the mask I'm going to use, I want those two holes to end up at the edges of the decal. So this is a pretty good distance, all right? So this is the distance I'm going to use. Now, what I'm going to do first is decide where I want the holes to go. So we'll do something like this. I'm going to mark one edge. All right, now I know it's at the top of that silver mark that I want the hole to be. Okay, and now in order to make sure that I don't end up crooked like this, right, I want it straight rather than crooked, I'm going to line this decal up and measure from the base of it how high up that hole was drawn. All right, so it is whatever that mark is. I think it's like 5/8 or something. And so I'm going to, at the same mark over here, make a little dot, and now I can go across the decal. I can make a line. So this is a straight line parallel to the bottom of the decal. Okay? And now I go back to the distance I measured on this. And I'm going to have one at the silver dot, and then the other one is going to be on that parallel line over here at this other silver dot. Okay, so now we're going to drill the holes. Okay, I have a 16th inch drill bit. All right, I also have here a center punch. So a center punch is used to make a divot in the metal so that when I use the drill bit, it goes right into the same spot that I used the center punch. Unfortunately, the center punch is a little too big for this very, very tiny drill bit, so I'm using this small screwdriver, which is the wrong tool for this job, but I'm using it anyway. So I'm going to mark right at the top of those marks I made and give that a little tap. You can see that that made a divot in the aluminum, right where that hole is going to go. And I'll give it a little tap. And now, using those center punched holes to guide my drill bit, I'm just going to go right through and into my backing plate here. Okay? So, now I've got 2 holes in my decal. Nope. Okay, I've got 2 holes in my decal. And in theory, they're going to line up with 2 holes on this mask. All right? So, in the way of kind of a test fit, I'm going to take these rivets and I'm going to put them through the hole in the decal first. All right? On each side. And then I'm going to test fit them through 2 holes on the mask. Okay, so they fit just fine through 2 holes there. All right? Now, you're not going to be able to see that they're sticking out because of the padding on the inside. Right? So the divots, or the rivets, are underneath this padding somewhere. All right? And we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, I can't start to attach this here yet because I don't have any holes drilled in the top. So what we're going to do is we're going to clamp this on first at the bottom where I know it's going to fit through these 2 holes because the rivets are already in. And then second, if I find my other clamp, stand by. Oh, there it is. And then second, at the top. Now I'm going to do my best to leave the corners. I'm not going to clamp on the corners because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use a marker and draw through the mesh on the back side of the decal, and we'll see what that looks like. So now I'm going to take this marker and I'm going to take my marker and I'm going to put it through the holes in the mesh and draw a little dot on the back side of the decal. Okay? Now, I'm drawing a bunch of dots through a bunch of different holes because I'm not sure which one is going to be exactly center on the decal or the best one to use. The padding is in the way a little bit down there on the far side of the decal, so I'm going to try to move it out of the way as best I can, like this, and then get the pen in there and mark those holes. So you might not be able to see this very well because I'm going to have to get in here, but I'll show you the result afterwards. Okay, so I'm done with marking my holes, and let's see what it looks like on the back side of the decal now. So when I take it off, you can see that I've got several black dots marked on either side, all right? And I know that each of these black dots is in the location of one of the holes in the mesh of the mask if these 2 lower rivets are already through some of the holes on the mask. So I'm going to pick some black dot, one on each side, one out of each of these groups, in a location that's, kind of in the middle of the decal, so in the middle of this edge, and not too far away from the edge, but also not right on it. So I'll go ahead and pick one, and the same technique I used before with my screwdriver in lieu of a center punch, I'm going to just go ahead and make some little guide notches and then drill 2 more holes. All right. So now I have all 4 of my holes drilled, and I can actually begin to start installing the decal. I'm gonna start on the bottom because that's where I started with the decal, with the drilling the holes in the first place. Okay, so I'm gonna make sure I put this in a place similar to where I started. And now, as I stated, the rivet is poking through this, or poking through the mesh behind this padding somewhere. And using my finger, you won't be able to see this, but using my finger, I can feel the rivet protruding right here. So I know that it's about a ½ inch below this rivet here, and that'll help me guide it when I secure the rivet. So in order to secure these rivets, because they're aluminum and they're so soft, we're just gonna hit the back side with a hammer while the front side is up against something strong. So I'm gonna lay the mask down onto the vise here. The vise is gonna be serving kind of like an anvil. First I'm gonna make sure that the decal is exactly where I want it to be. And that looks fine, so we're just gonna stick with that. So I'm gonna leave the rivet pressed into place here, and I'm gonna set it down so that if I look underneath, the rivet is up against the vise, which is serving as an anvil, right? And holding the mask so that that's there, if you come around here, I'm gonna now feel in here until I feel where that rivet is poking through, which is right here, right? And then I'm gonna use my ball peen hammer, and I'm just gonna give it a few little taps, all right? Now you can see this little spot on the padding now, right? And that's where the rivet was poking up, and I hit it with a hammer, so it made a little hole, not quite a hole, but a little hole in that padding. And that can tell me for sure that I hit the rivet, right? And as we look on the other side now, we can see that this is now well attached, and the rivet worked, okay? So next, we're gonna do the same process on the other low hole first. So we're gonna first put it through the decal, okay? Next, we're gonna line it up and get it through one of these holes. It went right into that hole there, all right? Now this time, I know that the rivet is very near this other rivet that's on the mask, right? Because of the way this is lined up. And so I know that I'm gonna be hitting somewhere near that rivet with my hammer. So I'm gonna do the same process as before. I'm gonna lay this mask upside down up against my acting anvil here. I'm gonna make sure that the bottom of that rivet is touching the hard surface there. And then I'm just gonna, in the area where I know the rivet is, I'm gonna give it a few little taps, and that should be enough to have that rivet secured, and it is. Okay? All right, so last up, we have these two rivets at the top. Now, even though we test fit this and drilled these holes in places where we should have no problem, there's sometimes a little bit of imprecision in this process, and so it could be that when you push this down, the rivet doesn't line up perfectly and doesn't immediately go through a hole, okay? So what I'm gonna do in this case, you could see that I kind of played with it a little bit and all of a sudden it slipped right through. You're just gonna use the hole that's closest to the rivet going through. You can see this one, maybe you can't tell, but it's a little bit crooked coming through that hole. It's not exactly perpendicular, but that doesn't matter, it's okay. So we're just gonna use whatever hole is closest, and we're gonna repeat the process of securing the rivet. I'm gonna lay it down on the anvil here so that the rivet is pressed, and then coming through, now that the rivet is clear on this side, so you can clearly see that rivet coming out of the mesh, right? So now you can see how this works. I'm just gonna tap the top of the rivet with this hammer, and you can see it starting to deform on the top there. And then a few more taps, and now that aluminum has deformed to fill the hole, but without deforming the actual mesh of the mask. And so now that's attached nicely on 3 corners. and we're just going to repeat the process on the fourth corner. So it's easiest if you first put the rivet through the hole in the decal, as I've done previously. It's a little hole. Okay, through the hole, and now we're gonna try to line it up with a hole in the mesh. At this last point, because the decal is not really gonna move anywhere, I might use a little pokey type tool to help push the rivet off center a little bit and get it through one of these holes in the mesh, right? And once I get it started through one of those holes, because the rivets are so soft, I can really just get it started and then press it, and it will, it may deform the rivet a little bit, but that's no problem. It's just going to go right through that hole. Again, this one is under the padding a little bit, but you can see it in there, perhaps, underneath the padding. And I'm just going to hit that with a hammer, making sure that the rivet is on my anvil. Press the mask down, give that a few taps. And now you can see that that mask is attached at all four corners. The decal is attached at all four corners. And there you go. So that's how you do this. Now, one last note is that on some types of masks, like the Leon Paul Exchange mask, where the padding isn't, you can remove the padding and you're not going to have this fixed padding here. You can skip the first step we did with the calipers and instead clamp the decal directly here first, and then because there's no padding in the way, you can mark all four corners the way that I marked only the top two corners, and then just drill the holes that way. And there you go, that's the process. So that's all.